Welcome to this online webinar, NHS, Life and Money, Parenthood, Menopause and Pensions, brought to you by SBK Healthcare and in collaboration with the Money and Pensions Service. To view our further online courses, including webinars, courses and conferences, please do visit our website at www.sbk-healthcare.co.uk. Thank you.
Hello, nice to be back presenting to groups of NHS employees through SBK. So glad to be invited back. So our session today is on parenthood, menopause and pensions. I'm going to start off with my colleague Chris, who's an insight manager at Money and Pensions Service. Money Helper, as you see there on the screen, is our brand. So our website is moneyhelper.org.uk. And Chris is going to start off by talking through a little bit about financial well-being, maternity leave, how that applies to regulations in this country and so on. So I'll start off with handing you over to Chris.
As Kath said, we're from Money Helper. So we're here to help people across the UK access the guidance and information they need to make effective financial decisions. And I'm Chris Phillips. I'm an insight manager. So in plain English, that means I run surveys to help understand how people manage their money and the issues they face, and also the way that that differs for different groups in the population. I'm talking for around 10 minutes about financial wellbeing and gender, and this is going to lead into Kath's in-depth section about parenthood, menopause and pensions. So on the next slide, first, what's financial wellbeing? So here's a text definition. It's, for us at MAPS, it's about feeling secure and in control, and it's about making the most of your money from day to day, dealing with the unexpected, and being on track for a healthy financial future. So we're going to look at that in terms of gender. So on the next slide, how do we measure that? So several surveys, a few years, and some statisticians have boiled it down for us to around 9 key questions. So this isn't going to pick up everything. So I think we've possibly jumped forward more slides than we wanted to, but okay.
Sorry.
So I think eventually the slides will probably catch up with where I've got to. So those kind of the 9 things that we'll get back to in a minute, they're not going to pitch up everything, but they're a useful measure of who's got, that looks brilliant, that one, thanks. They're a useful measure of who's got lower or higher financial well-being. So it's thinking about things like paying the bills and not needing credit to be able to do so, saving, being able to pay an unexpected bill of £300, being able to last some time if you lost your main source of income, and doing some planning of your finances for retirement and feeling that you understand enough to make decisions about this, plus feeling confident managing money and generally being satisfied with your financial circumstances. So circumstances do change during our lives, but generally, the better that we're doing on these 9 things, the more satisfied we've found people tend to be with their lives. And having those things in mind means that we can look at how different parts of the population are doing. So today we're focusing on gender, and in particular on women's experience. As part of our public sector equality duty, we do also look at gender identity, including non-binary gender identities. There's more on this in the report that I've linked to on the slides. Generally, much like women, people with non-binary identities tend to have lower financial well-being, and you can find more information if you want in the report about that. So specifically looking at women's financial well-being on the next slide, and apologies that I'm a man talking about this. So here's a table of some stats based on those 9 key aspects that I just mentioned. So everything here is expressed in negative terms, so bigger numbers are worse. And we've shown the stats for women and the stats for men, and then the gender gap, which is the women's score minus the men's score. The table's then being ranked by the size of that gender gap. So this helps you pick out a couple of key things here, which I'm guessing are probably not really going to be that much of a surprise. So generally, women appear to be doing less well on almost all of these key measures. Biggest gaps are in pensions and retirement planning, so they're shown at the top. And then the gaps tend to be a bit smaller for medium and shorter term financial issues. So these are the things in around the middle, around savings, confidence managing money, and bills and payments and so on. So on to the next slide, this kind of starts looking at, okay, why do we see these differences? So the big thing that we've picked out on the left is around employment. So women are much more likely to be working part-time rather than full-time, tend to have lower personal incomes. Apologies for the typo on the second bullet point there. It should say 25% of men rather than 35% of men. And women are also less likely to have the highest income in the household. Then on the right, I've kind of shown this alongside some other issues that all are linked and kind of interact. So there are things like pregnancy, maternity, parenthood, being an adult carer for an adult, the menopause, and divorce. And all of these have particular impacts for women on financial well-being in the short and the medium and the longer term. So many of them are linked. Most obviously, the links between maternity and parenthood and incomes, for example. There's also a what else on there, because this is by no means an exhaustive list. So some of them can interact with other factors like how deprived your local area is, and whether you've got a limiting long-term condition or disability. So for the rest of the session, we're looking at some of these issues in a bit more detail, and what you as an individual or you as a professional in your work may be able to do to address them. So the first one of these is around maternity and paternity. So I've highlighted some areas of support that there are on the Money Helper website there. So there's content around specifically around becoming a parent, which takes you through that kind of particular journey of thinking about issues there. And then there are also links to more specific and targeted detailed pieces of information around maternity leave and pay, and maternity and paternity leave and your pension, which I think Kath is going to cover in a bit more detail, the sort of impacts there for state, personal, and NHS pensions. And certainly on something like maternity leave and pay, we've got things that split that out in terms of what statutory provision is, how shared parental leave and pay work, and so on, and also what your position is when returning to work. So you can follow a journey through on the way in the style of the link on the left, or you can go in and look for a lot more specific, targeted, and detailed information. So at that point, I think I'll pass over to Kath, who will talk in a bit more detail, and look forward to hearing any questions at the end.
Hey, thank you very much, Chris. And it's interesting looking at those slides there and the things that Chris, independently of me, has picked out for some of the reasons in women's income in retirement and so on. And you'll see we come up with a very similar list of things. But I'm going to start off talking about the state pension. Now, the state pension is an important part of most people's retirement income. And the first thing to say is that it's paid in addition to any private pensions that you have. So it's not means tested. So no matter how much private pension you build up, you're still entitled to state pension. And the full state pension for people retiring under the state pension rules now, that's people retiring after 5th of April 2016, is about £10,600 a year for the full amount. So for most of us, that's not really enough to live off comfortably on its own, but it's going to be a really important part of our income, especially as that money is guaranteed to pay out for the rest of our lives and it's linked to inflation. And there's always a lot of news about that inflation link in the press, and there is at the moment again. Now, the current rules say that you need at least 35 years of national insurance to get this full amount. And for some people, you actually need more than 35 years. And that will include members of the NHS or other pension schemes that were contracted out before 2016. So it's important that you check your forecast to see if you are on track to get the full amount. And this slide, all the bits there that are underlined are links, so you can check your state pension age and how to get your forecast. And there's information about how you could pay voluntary national insurance contributions if you needed to fill in any gaps in your record. Now, the good news about state pension and national insurance is that you don't need to be earning a high salary or even work at all to get credits towards your state pension. So you'll get credits if you're unable to work. And importantly, in the context of today's presentation, that includes if you're receiving child benefit for a child under the age of 12. And if you're working part-time, you only need to be earning £6,396 a year to get a credit. You don't start paying national insurance until you earn £12,570 a year. That's the same point you start paying income tax, but you get credited at £6,396 a year. And this is a key one as well. If you don't qualify to receive a benefit, say child benefit, your partner's earning over the limit, so you haven't bothered claiming. Well, as long as you've got underlying entitlement to that benefit, i.e., you would get it if it wasn't for that means testing element, you can still get that national insurance credit towards your state pension. So it's well worth doing for that reason. Now, the first step in understanding your state pension is to get the state pension forecast. Then what you can do is ring Money Helper to discuss what it means if you're not sure. There's a few bits on that forecast that people typically don't understand. So don't just sit there with it thinking, well, that was a waste of time. I still don't know what it means, or guessing what it means. Give us a call at Money Helper. I'll give you all the contact details later on, and we can talk it through with you. So the new state pension now is being built up in a way that means whether you earn £7,000 a year or £70,000 a year, or if you're on benefits, you're still getting the same state pension built up. And that is improving the balance between what women and men receive for the state pension and their overall retirement income. So it is starting to close the gap, but there's still a long way to go. So if we move on to private pensions, and private pensions are all pensions apart from the state pension. And the really key thing here, and I wish this is just one message that I could get out to the whole country, is there are two types of private pension. Really important to understand the two types. So the NHS will provide you with the promise of a pension. This is what's called a defined benefit or a DB scheme, because it's the benefit that you receive that is defined by calculations in the scheme rules. So once you've paid your contribution, it's up to the scheme to make sure there's enough money in the scheme's collective pot to pay your benefits. So you have the choice about when to take the pension. And if you take it early, you'll usually get less per year because it will pay out for longer. And you can choose how much tax-free cash you want to take. There might be a minimum amount, the minimum might be zero, and there will be a maximum amount. And in this type of scheme, you will take the tax-free cash and start taking the pension at the same time. You can't do the tax-free cash and leave the pension for later. Now, you will get tax relief on your pension contributions at your marginal income tax rate when you're paying into the scheme. And you're getting employer contributions too. So in the NHS, the employer is paying an extra 20% on top of your salary into the pension scheme to provide those benefits. So when you take your pension, you also have that choice of taking 25% of the value as a tax-free cash lump sum, and there are death benefits payable to loved ones. So you're looking at a tax-efficient way of saving, and as well employer contributions contributing to the benefits that you're going to build up. Now, you may also have a defined contribution or DC pension, either from elsewhere or from a money purchase AVC in the NHS scheme. Now, a DC pension is a pot of money that you and your employer, if that's applicable, pay into. And that money is invested and will hopefully grow over time. And you've got more flexible options at retirement for this. You've got more options about how much you pay in. You've got more options about how you take it out. So, for example, you could just take part of the pension out. You could just take the tax-free cash and leave the rest of the money for later. But in this type of pension, you don't have a guarantee how much it's going to pay you. So you don't know in advance how much you're going to get. And the links on these slides are where you've got here underlined. There's a bit more information about each of those two types of scheme. So NHS scheme on the left, defined benefit, because it's the benefit that you're going to receive that is defined. And the defined contribution would include Nest or other personal pensions or other workplace schemes perhaps. And these are the type where you've got a pot of money with more flexibility and less guarantees. So let's come on to parenthood and private pensions. Now, membership of a pension scheme does have a lot of protection when it comes to maternity, paternity, and adoption leave. So the details of all the rules are quite complicated, and they do depend upon a number of factors. So I'm not going to attempt to give you all the permutations of that. I will just provide a summary. So while you're receiving pay from your employer, you build up a pension in a DB scheme like the NHS, just the same as you were doing before. So you still got the same pensionable service building up. In a defined contribution scheme like Nest, you will continue to receive the same amount of money from your employer into your pension as before as well. So that is still building up. However, the thing that people are usually worried about during maternity leave is the cost of paying into your pension, because your salary is going to go down. You might have extra costs as well. So if you're going to be on a reduced salary, how can you afford to stay in the pension scheme? Well, the good news is that your costs reduce with your ability to pay. So your contributions will remain at the same percentage rate, say that's 7%, but they'll be based on the amount of salary that you actually receive. So you're paying less, but the employer doesn't. Now, you still may be concerned about the cost when your income is lower, but I would encourage you to find out the actual cost to you and your take-home pay, how that will affect you, and consider whether you can continue to pay to build up a pension while you are on leave. And, you know, Chris has already touched on it, and I'll come back to it, that, you know, women do lose out, obviously, through certain points in their lives through the pensions. So if there's any chance you can keep your pension at a full level, that's going to be really beneficial to you in the future. Now, this next slide is just an example of the legislation around pension contributions and membership for maternity leave. And this is really for members of a DB scheme like the NHS. So from weeks 1 to 39, when you're getting full or reduced pay, you've got the same pension building up, but your contributions will be a percentage of your actual pay. So you're paying less, but you're getting the same pension. Now, there's no legal entitlement to remain a member of the scheme when you're on zero pay, but this will depend on individual scheme rules or your contract of employment. So the contract of employment might say you get your pension for full 52 weeks. So those are the kind of things to look out for. And also, if anybody's in a salary sacrifice scheme, due to different laws in place there, again, you might get full payments for the full 52 weeks. Again, we've got a couple of bits on here underlined. So we've got a link there to information about the NHS scheme rules and some general guidance about these maternity pension contributions on the Money Helper website. So women and pensions. So yeah, we've touched on it already. The gender pay gap is improving, And as I mentioned earlier, the new state pension is helping to address the gender pension gap, but there is still a significant difference between the retirement income for men and women. Different studies will come up with slightly different figures. It depends exactly what question you ask and who you ask it to, but it's certainly in the ballpark of women having about half the pension pot that a man has. So there's a number of reasons for this. And that includes pay. So the gender pay gap, it's getting better in younger generations, but it's still 25% in women over 50. So if you're earning 25% less, generally speaking, you're building up 25% less pension as well. But also, as we've just touched on, career breaks. If you take a career break, such as unpaid maternity leave, you might not be building up any pension during those periods of service or working life. So that's another factor. Part-time work. I know Chris had some figures on there as well. 75% of part-time workers are women. And obviously, again, if you're earning less than someone doing the same job full-time, you're getting less pension built up as well. And it's become increasingly obvious that menopause plays a role as well. So I'll come back to that one. So throughout a woman's life, she's likely to be earning less, and that has the knock-on consequence that she's generally going to have less pension as well. And some of the factors that we're talking about here, and when we talk about menopause, could also apply to people in other situations, such as those with disabilities or other carers. Pension also often not considered fully in divorce proceedings. And even when there has been a financial settlement for other assets, for example, maybe a woman's kept the marital home as an asset so she can stay there and bring up the children, that might be her immediate priority, but it's not necessarily going to help her with a pension income going forward. So it's a matter of considering not just the short-term situation when we're looking at our finances, including divorce, but looking at right into retirement as well. So how can menopause affect the pension? So, we will change our jobs, we'll change our hours for all sorts of different reasons. But 400,000 people start menopause each year, and 70% of them will feel that their performance at work is likely to be affected. 25% of them experience severe or life-changing symptoms such that they actually consider giving up work as a result of that. And it's estimated that 1 million people have left the workplace due to menopause symptoms. And another statistic is 23% of women who have symptoms have left work as a result. Now, this is something that obviously affects individuals, but it also affects employers. And so a lot of employers like the NHS are taking this really seriously. And they will have different policies put in place to try and enable women to stay in work. Again, different studies will provide slightly different figures on these statistics, but they're usually in this ballpark. So we're looking at, a quarter of women, having really significant symptoms, which is likely to affect their work. And menopause is also a time when people are struggling with the jobs, consider reducing hours, reducing responsibility, or even retire completely. So it may be that you just stick with the same job, not considering promotion or anything else, because you can't face the change or you don't have the confidence to go through an interview process. And so whatever your situation, whatever your reasons, it's important to think about all of your options, especially as with pensions and leaving work, some of those decisions can be irreversible. So options such as retiring early or reducing hours don't just affect your current income, but it's the income for the rest of your life. And so you need to consider things really carefully. Your symptoms might be temporary, they may be treatable. And so thinking of menopause symptoms as a long-term but temporary condition rather than a permanent change that's never going to get better could be useful as well. And it's especially important to give yourself time to think about these things calmly, because during menopause, we might be having brain fog, anxiety, fatigue, and all sorts of issues that affect our ability to make a decision. Even just the embarrassment or not wanting to speak to a manager about, not feeling comfortable in your uniform because you're having sweats, for example. All sorts of things can lead up to, rather than discuss it, rather than plan ahead, you just decide to leave the workplace. But hopefully, having had time to think about your options a little bit more, understanding them a bit more, and knowing that there are people at Money Helper where you can talk through the options for your pension without any sort of judgment could be helpful to you as well. So, we're talking about making these changes and it will affect your pension. So, how does it actually affect your pension if you change your work? Now, if you're struggling with work for any reason, you might be thinking, as I say, about reducing your hours or taking a role with less responsibility. Now, for people in the NHS scheme, everyone is now in the 2015 career average or care section of the scheme. But many of you will have benefits in the 1995 and 2008 sections, which are final salary schemes. And this is what I'll look at first. And it was pointed out at the beginning with those QR codes, there was a previous presentation explaining the different aspects of these schemes in more detail. So if you want to go back and have a look at your particular scheme, how it works a bit more generally, then do use those QR codes for the presentations that are on YouTube. So if you're in the 2015 section now, and you've got previous benefits in the 2008 and 1995 final salary pension, then reducing your hours now won't affect any of those final salary benefits. Okay. However, reducing your rate of pay, i.e. going down a band, can affect those final salary benefits. It's unlikely to have an immediate effect, but it could affect all your years of final salary pension. So you must contact your pension scheme administrator if you're thinking of doing that, if you're thinking of taking a drop in your hourly rate of pay. So the 1995 sections and 2008 sections, they work differently. You might have gaps in service, so some of your pension might be affected and some not. So it's really better to check how it affects you personally with the professionals who have your details. I'm only going to be able to ever give an overview. Always best to go to the NHS scheme for something that's so individual and so important. As I said, everybody now is in the 2015 section or the career average section. In a career average scheme like 2015 section, you build up a block of pension each year based on your earnings in that year. And it doesn't actually matter if you're part-time or full-time as such, or if your earnings went up and down during that year. It's the total amount of your earnings for that year that's important. So you build it up throughout the year. That block of pension is banked, and that will increase each year with inflation. And sometimes that'll be increasing more than your salary does. The next year, you build up another block of pension, and that's banked too. And the following year, they'll both be increased with inflation. So if you decide to reduce your hours or reduce your rate of pay now, that's going to affect the amount of pension you're building up going forward, based on the fact that your salary has dropped, your total earnings for the year has dropped. The little block of pension will go from the dark blue to the smaller light blue in the slide. But it doesn't affect any of your previous years in the 2015 scheme, because each of those has been banked and simply gets an inflationary increase. They're not linked to your current salary. But also just remember, if you have final salary pensions, do check that if you're reducing your rate of pay, whether your final salary pensions will be affected. So just because you're in the 2015 section now, don't forget about the final salary benefits. Now, taking early retirement can have a double whammy effect on your pension income. This example is based on the 1995 scheme, but the principle is just the same for any defined benefit schemes, including the 2015 scheme. It's just clearer to give a final salary example because it's a simpler calculation to show. So in this example, we've got Lisa. So in the top half of the box, if Lisa works for 25 years until her normal retirement age of 60, and she's got a final pensionable salary of £40,000, her pension calculation is 25 years times the salary of £40,000 divided by a factor, which is 80 in this case, and that gives her a pension of £12,500 a year, payable from age 60. On the other hand, if Lisa decided to retire early at 55, well, at that point, she's only got 20 years service, so she's paid into the scheme for less. So that's the first thing to consider. We're going to assume a salary was already at £40,000, just for simplicity. So she's got 20 years times £40,000, and again, we divide that by 80. But then, because she's taking a pension earlier, it's going to pay out for longer. So we need to reduce it to reflect that, to make it fairer, because it's going to pay out for longer, she gets less per year. So in this example, she's going to get a pension of about £8,000 a year, payable from 55. So in each of those cases, in the 1995 section, there would also be an automatic lump sum. Now, you can see that reducing her years by a fifth has reduced her pension by more than a third. And if her salary had increased in those final 5 years, there'd be an even bigger difference. And do remember that that lower pension is payable for the rest of your life. So it doesn't just affect you in your 50s or in your 60s or coming up to state pension age. It's also going to affect you in your 70s, 80s, hopefully in your 90s. So it's thinking about pensions as a really long-term thing and think, yes, I can cope with this now. Will I still be able to cope with this reduced pension in years to come? Now, I'm not saying for a minute that early retirement is a bad idea. It's only a problem if you're going to retire early because you feel you had to, due to illness or caring responsibilities or something like that, without really planning for the level of income that you would have, without discussing it, without doing those sums first. So if you have done the sums and you're happy with the amount you'll receive and you want to have more years of retirement, that's absolutely great. It's always going to be a compromise between your level of income and the free time to relax. Just by way of a brief illustration, as I said, that example sort of covered all defined benefit, DB schemes. It's really quite similar in a defined benefit, defined contribution pension as well. So you'll still have that same issue really of paying into the pension for less time and stretching out the money for longer. So again, if you remember, in this type of scheme, a defined contribution pot, you don't have the promise of a particular pension. So there isn't a reduction factor as such for taking it earlier, but you do need to stretch it out for longer. So like in the 2015 section, paying less into the pension now due to reduced hours or reduced rate of pay means you're building up less pension going forward. But if you want to use the pot to take a pension for life, taking it earlier means that you will get less per year. And you can use all sorts of different figures here. In this example, Louise is 50, earning £30,000 a year. She and her employer are both paying 5% into a pension, and she's already got a pot of £150,000. And so if she waited until 60 to retire, she'd get about £7,100 a year from a pension. But if she retired at 55, she'd get a pension of about £5,500. Because everybody's situation is different, but it just trying to illustrate that taking early retirement, because of that double whammy effect of paying in for less and stretching it out for longer, it can have a significant income effect. So what's the point of this presentation? other than giving you some interesting or boring information, depending on your point of view? Well, it's really to encourage you to think about your options, whatever your age, gender, and situation is now. So a pension isn't something that happens to you, which is the attitude that many of us in this country have. You can control it, at least to an extent. So if we look at partial retirement, retirement doesn't have to be a cliff edge anymore. It's rare now that I speak to someone who's retiring from work, taking all the private pensions and the state pension all at the same time. You're allowed to take part of your pension if you reduce your salary, and this is called partial retirement. And the NHS, as you're probably aware, has made significant changes to the flexibility they allow with the pensions this year, especially for people who have the 1995 benefits. So you can usually take between 20% and 100% of your pension, and you can choose to take any additional pension you may have purchased in full at the same time as you take part of your scheme benefits, or you could leave that for later. Now, partial retirement does need to be done in agreement with your employer, so make sure that you discuss your options with them if you're thinking about it. And retire and return is also an option where you can take the full pension. You would have a 24-hour break in service and then return to work where you can rejoin the pension scheme. So for most people, there isn't any abatement now, so salary isn't an issue. But you must ensure that you don't lose any employment benefits related to your previous service due to that break in service. What else might you want to think about? So Money Helper, we don't provide financial advice. We don't tell you what to do. But we do strongly suggest that you take time to think about any decisions relating to your pension. And it's particularly important not to rush into anything if you're feeling exhausted, stressed, hopeless, or overwhelmed. And you could feel like that due to illness, caring responsibilities, menopause, or other factors. So perimenopause will often start to affect women in their mid-40s. So there might be 20 years of working life still ahead of us at that point. And even retiring at 55 might mean missing out on a number of years of salary and salary increases. And it could lead to a significant reduction to your overall pension income in the end. So it's really not surprising that the gender pay gap is greater in pension age than in salaries. So if you're retiring early due to menopause or due to looking after elderly parents or anything else, that is going to affect your pension. So temporary solutions such as sick leave, maybe taking a career break to give yourself a bit of a time out, a change of role, or maybe you just need some adjustments to help keep you at work. And as I said, a lot of companies, including the organisation, NHS, they will be encouraged to keep you in work. Someone in the 50s will often have a great deal of experience and a lot to offer the company or the organisation, and they really do want to keep you there if they can. Just to mention, if you do decide to leave the NHS to work elsewhere and you want to understand the pension that's offered there, please do give us a call. We can't tell you what you should do, but we can explain the difference between the pension that you've got with the NHS and the pension that you might be offered elsewhere. Now, I know we're very conscious at the moment of the cost of living going up, and our wages perhaps not going up as much. But at certain points in our lives, you may have periods where you do have spare income, and that might be in your later years, maybe as costs of children and housing become less of a strain, or it might be in your early years. You might decide to plan ahead for a career break or part-time work or early retirement, and you could pay more into pensions when you're younger or as you're approaching retirement age. Now, the options that are suitable for you will depend upon your own circumstances. There are 3 options for paying extra into the NHS scheme. So you can either buy more guaranteed pension, you can buy a separate flexible defined contribution pot with an AVC, or you can effectively reduce the retirement age on your 2015 retirement benefits. You could also pay into a completely separate personal pension if you wish, or of course there are other savings options. And the Lifetime ISA is another tax-efficient savings scheme for people under the age of 40. And again, we've got links on there for more information about these things. So what can you do now? So I want to give you some options, some next steps, maybe to help you think about planning your retirement. And the first thing really is getting any information together about all of your private pensions. Are there any that you might have lost contact with? Are the pensions the defined benefit or the defined contribution type? So trace lost pensions, you can see is underlined. That's a link to more information on this. We can help with that, or there's a government service called the Pension Tracing Service that can help as well. Check your state pension forecast. As we said, that's likely to be a big part of your retirement income. So it may confirm that you're on track to get the full pension, or it might point out some gaps that you can have the option to fill. Either way, really good idea to just check where you are with your pension, know that what your state pension is and what you're on track to get. And then you might have these statements. You might be thinking, I don't really understand these numbers on a piece of paper, but I'm not getting what they're telling me. Give us a call. If you don't understand what you've got, is it a defined benefit pension? Is it defined contribution pension? Are you definitely going to get that maximum state pension that's quoted? If you're not sure, give us a call and we can talk it through with you. On our website, we have a pension calculator, and that can help you see how much pension you might provide, how much your private pensions might provide for you in retirement. It's most suitable for people paying into defined contribution pensions, though. So if your main pension is the NHS scheme, do make sure you look at your pensions statements there. Thinking about how much you need. So the budget planner could help with that. There are sort of guideline amounts as to, what might be a moderate income for a single person living outside of London. That might be £23,000 or something, say. But really thinking about your own situation, what's your position going to be? Are you going to have rent to pay? Will you have paid off the mortgage? Will you have a partner to help share the bills with? Will you have debts still to pay off? Will you have savings in the bank? Are you likely to get an inheritance that's going to help? So everyone's situation is different. Think about your own circumstances and how much you're going to need to live on and what assets you'll have. And then finally, always make sure your death benefit nominations are up to date. So that's for your NHS pension and any other pensions that you have. That just tells the pension scheme who you would want benefits paid to if you were to pass away. Now, scammers will try and get money out of us in any way they can think of and more, and pensions is no exception to that. There is a lot of legislation and safeguards in place, but it's still important to be aware of the warning signs, because if you do get scammed, you may lose all your pension and not get any of it back. So one of the things is no one's allowed to call you out of the blue about pensions. If anyone's trying to rush you into making a decision, that could be a warning sign. If anyone says you can access your pension early, the normal age is 55. Some of you will have a protected pension age of 50, and that's absolutely fine. But otherwise, people saying you can take it early, that's likely to be a scam. If they're sort of trying to suggest these special offers, if something really sounds a bit too good to be true, it really probably is. And there's a link here for a site with the pensions, the Financial Conduct Authority on scams in pensions. A key thing with the NHS pension is that you can't normally transfer it out. So, but for most of you that have been in the scheme for years, no one can really scam you out of your NHS pension as such, other than maybe taking your tax-free cash to invest it badly, because you can't transfer that out. As I said, we can't make any decisions for you, but we can discuss your options. We can act as a sounding board for your thoughts, and your scheme administrator can provide quotations and answer technical queries about your own pension. So there are contact details, our phone number. We can answer questions, anything to do with pensions on that helpline, and also a web chat. There's the contact details for the NHS administrators. And then if you're looking for something more general money related, there's the contact details there for the money guidance helpline and web chat as well. So thank you very much for your attention today. I know it's a lot to take in all at once. So remember, these slides will be available afterwards, and the presentation has also been recorded. And you can also call us at Money Helper with any questions. So now I'll go to Vanessa and Emma and see if they've got any questions for us.
Hi, Kath. Thank you. That was brilliant. Chris, could you come on screen again, please, for the Q&A? That would be marvellous. We've got loads of questions. I think it's really important at this point to reiterate that you are only able to offer guidance. You're not able to offer advice. So please do understand that if there's a question here that can't be answered, it's with your best interest at heart. So an anonymous attendee has asked, on the examples you gave about early retirement, you divided the figures by 80. Is it always 80, and where does 80 come from?
So 80 is the figure that the 1995 scheme uses. The 2008 scheme uses 60. So it does vary different schemes. So if you have other pensions, you just have to check the rules of the scheme. But say that example is really to provide an overall illustration rather than, a specific, this is what's going to happen in your case.
Kate Palmer asks, is there a maximum contribution allowed, for example, 35 or 40 years?
So the maximum contribution has gone away with the new flexibility rules this year. So you can continue paying into the 2015 scheme.
Oh, that's interesting. I actually just, as a matter, I checked whilst you were talking my retirement age, and it's really easy. I would actually encourage everyone to do it. It's super, super quick. I did it whilst Kath was presenting. It was really easy. What figure do you use to calculate your pension? I'm part-time, term time only. On my payslip, I have time equivalent and actual income due to term time only.
Okay, so the pension that you're building up at the moment in the 2015 scheme is based on the amount of earnings you have in that year. So the fact that it's term time, part-time, all those sorts of things doesn't really matter. If you earn £15,000 in the year, that's what will be used to say how much pension you have, and then that will be divided by the figure for the 2015 scheme to give you a proportion of pension. So I think it's 54ths, I think, in the 2015 scheme. So 15,000, say, divided by 54, that gives you the amount of pension you've built up in that year.
So someone asks that they've got a pension with the Home Office. They never receive any correspondence about it. How do they find out how much and where to receive it? And actually, I've got another question about this of similar ilk that asks about a pension that's in Ireland and how you're able to pull that pot together.
Okay, so the Home Office will be the civil service pension scheme. So if you go online and look for civil service pension scheme, you should come up with a site called My CSP, and you can contact them. So it is normal that you don't get a statement every year from a scheme like this once you're not paying into it anymore, because effectively nothing has changed since you left. When you left, they promised, we will pay you this amount of pension when you get to retirement age, and between now and then we'll increase it with inflation each year. And that's what they'll be doing. So obviously, if you don't have that information or you want an updated figure to see how inflation's getting on, then do contact them. If you've moved house and not let them know, again, do contact them. Like with the NHS, depending on what scheme you're in, some of them are payable from 60 and not increased for late retirement. So as you approach age 60, you really need to know if you're in a scheme that does that. Now, from Ireland, it depends what type of scheme it is. You can't transfer benefits in either case into the NHS scheme once you've been a member of the NHS scheme for a year. So if you're a new starter and you've got other pensions, then you can transfer them in. If you've been in the NHS a while, you can't. Now, the Irish scheme will be considered an overseas pension scheme. So it is possible to transfer that into the UK. It depends what type of scheme it is, but you wouldn't be able to transfer it into your NHS scheme. So that's probably one to contact us about with a bit more details on what the scheme is and if there's a particular reason why you want to transfer it and that kind of thing.
Perfect. So we have a couple of questions about benefit nominations. So the first question reads, whom do I nominate? She has a son who's 29, a daughter who's 25. Can they put them between both of them, or do they need one person?
Yeah, so in a scheme like the NHS, a defined benefit scheme, there are two types of death benefit. One is lump sums, and adult children like that can receive lump sum death benefits, and that could include death in service benefits as well, which is a multiple of your salary. What they can't receive is a pension, a spouse's pension or a child's pension, because they're obviously not your spouse and they're no longer financially dependent on you. So once a child is 23 and or out of full-time education, they can't normally get a child's pension. It's only allowed if, for example, they had a disability or learning difficulties, which meant they were still dependent on you and weren't able to earn their own living. But the lump sum death benefits are payable, so do make sure your nominations are up to date for those, and the death in service lump sum as well.
That follows on really nicely. Someone asks if the NHS death benefit nomination is still for a spouse or a civil partner only. She says, is it possible to nominate if you're single?
Yeah, so again, it is important if you're single to nominate, but accept that you're not nominating for someone to receive equivalent of a spouse's pension. It's for lump sum death benefits.
Okay, so to return to the question about Scotland and Ireland before we move on, keep it fresh in your mind. Anne asked for clarification that she paid into NHS pension schemes in Scotland and Northern Ireland, so still the UK, but these contributions don't appear on her current pension estimate. How can she access them?
So, as things stand, England and Wales is looked after separately to Scotland, which is looked after separately to Northern Ireland. So you'll need to contact the Scottish pensions NHS, which is SPPA, and the Northern Ireland administrators, which is HSC. So again, if you can't find them, if you don't have contact details, just get in touch with us and you should be able to find it, or the pension tracing service would have those details as well. But the administrators that you're looking for is HSC for the NHS in Northern Ireland and SPPA for the NHS in Scotland, but they're held separately.
I think it's worthwhile noting that we're due to finish in 5 minutes, but Kath has kindly agreed to stay on for an additional 15 minutes. So if you'd like to stay on, we'll keep the webinar open and we will answer these questions. But you know, if you've got commitments, please do feel free to log off at 1. So an anonymous attendee asks, would it be better to put all my pension in one pot or keep them as they are currently with different companies?
So, as I mentioned before, you can only normally transfer all your pensions into the NHS scheme if you've been working there for less than a year. So putting them all into one pot might not be possible. And then the next thing is thinking about what other pensions that you've got. So are any of them defined benefit pensions like the NHS? For example, if you'd worked for the local council, if you've been a teacher or been in the police, or you know, some private companies would have final salary type pensions. Those ones need to be treated differently to the ones where you've got a pot of money, the defined contribution ones. If you've got defined contribution pots of money that have got no special benefits or guarantees on them, they are quite easy to move from one pension to another, put them all in one place. But it's really a matter of finding out what you've got and then going from there, really. So again, we have information on the website about that, about transferring defined contribution pensions. But again, give us a call. It's a really common question to ask. And it might be easier if you've got paperwork for those pensions, have that in front of you. And then we can ask you questions about that and pick out the keywords that tell us, you know, what type of pension you've got and whether there's anything special about it.
Thank you. So, somewhere Annabelle asks, will I still receive my state pension if I live abroad?
Yes, you do. Depending on where you live abroad, you might not get the annual increases on it. So if you live in the European Union and some other places, you still get the annual increases. If you live in the USA or Australia, most places, then you don't get the increase, but you still get the pension.
Okay. So we've got, can my small pension pot with the teacher's pension fund be combined with my NHS pension? I only paid into it for about 2 years.
Only if you're within your first year of working with the NHS.
Okay. I think that's important to like clarify. Is that correct, Kath? That within the first year you can move pension pots into your NHS pension. But after that first year period, pension pots that are pre-existing stay pre-existing.
Yeah, that's right.
Thank you. Holly asks, how do you nominate someone for pension benefits? Is there a particular website? Oh, death benefits.
Yeah. So if you go onto the NHS Pensions website, there's links there. There's also information to tell you who you can nominate and all those sorts of things as well. So I can't remember if that link was on the slide. I don't think it was in this case. But yeah, if you go to the I've got that underlined there, so that might be a link to the NHS site, I suspect.
An attendee asks, does old SERPs opt-out impact us? No. How does the old SERPs opt-out impact us? Know who are coming up to retirement?
So the thing there is check that state pension forecast. So I did briefly mention that your NHS pension would have been contracted out up to 2016. You may have been member of another pension scheme that was contracted out. So there was a lot of personal pensions back in the 80s, early 90s, where you would opt out of SERPs. What that did was you were paying less national insurance into the state scheme, and those national insurance savings were going into your private pension. So you're getting more private pension, less state pension. Now, whether that is going to affect you and your state pension amount really depends on your circumstances, how long you were opted out, how long it's been since stopping being opted out until state pension age and so on. So again, get that state pension forecast. It's basically impossible to guess. So get the forecast. If you're not sure what it's telling you, give us a call.
Thank you. There are 2 questions from Nikki Monroe. So the first one reads, I've worked for 3 different trusts since 2001 with continuous service. How do I ensure the pension contributions have been linked and are all accounted for? And then a follow-up question of, if I was to work for the trust bank but not have a permanent contract, how do pension contributions work? Can I still have the same pension pot?
Yeah, so normally if you move just from one local authority to another, so within England or within Scotland, the pensions will be linked together. So as long as there isn't a 5-year gap, it will just continue with continuous service. And you should be able to see that by looking on your reward statement, the TRS, and that should show you the period of service that you're looking at. I don't have an example that I can show you, but the total reward statement should tell you how many years you've built up, and hopefully that should link in. If you've been part-time, that might make it a little bit more complicated. But again, if you're not sure, either get that information and call us and we can talk it through, or probably better in this sort of case is ring the NHS administrators, and then they'll be able to tell you what is included. And so there was another part to the question.
Yes, so they were referring to this continuous line of work across 3 trusts. How can they ensure that there are 3?
Oh yeah, and the bank service. So I'm not quite sure how they treat that, whether they treat it any different. I'm afraid you'll have to check with the employer what they do there.
Someone's asked, is there a charge? I think that this question came in when it was in reference to the pension trace.
Mm-hmm.
I don't believe so.
No. So we can help you, but there's also a government organisation called the Pension Tracing Service, and that is part of the Department for Work and Pensions. I think they can have access to some of your records and can do some looking around for you. We only have access to what you have access to on the Pension Tracing Service website. So there's a phone number, there's a website, and so if you worked for Joe Blogs Limited, you can say, find my pension for Joe Blogs Limited, and hopefully it will come up with contact details for the pension scheme that's looking after it. It's not perfect, it's not 100% accurate and up to date. In a couple of years' time, we will hope to have something called the pensions dashboard, where you'll be able to put your national insurance number in, and hey presto, this is your state pension, these are all your private pensions. And that's going to be an absolute game changer. But until then, it's a bit of scrabbling around for information, I'm afraid. But you shouldn't have to pay for it. Companies that advertise, they are obviously going to get money from you somehow, whether that's through charging you to combine your pensions together, or whether it's charging you a higher rate than you need to be paying once they have combined them together for you. They're not doing it for the good of the health, but Money Helper and Pension Tracing Service, part of DWP, were for free.
Brilliant, thank you. Cheryl asks, how does the McLeod judgment affect us in the taper period?
So the McLeod judgment is sort of still a little bit of a work in progress. You should be getting calculations for anyone that's retiring and so on coming up shortly. So the key thing is, for most people, the McLeod judgment isn't going to make a great deal of difference to your benefits, and it will only increase them, if anything. So no one's benefits are going to go down from what's currently showing on your total reward statement. It might go up a little bit, but there is no need to hurry up your retirement, delay your retirement, or anything else because of it. You will end up getting the better of calculation, what's best for you, whenever you take that pension. So if you take the pension now and they haven't got the calculations yet, then you'll get it backdated. So there is a bit more in McLeod in the other presentation, but the really key thing is it's nothing to worry about. You will get the better of whenever you retire. So don't rush into do anything because of it.
With paternity leave within the NHS, would one receive full pay? Why is it that paternity leave has to be taken all in one block?
I'm afraid that's out of my remit. um, so yeah, it does have to be taken in one go. I don't know why that is. That's a legislation thing, I think, really. But yes, you get that full pay for the 2 weeks, I believe.
So I'm going to try and be quite methodical for the last like 6 or so minutes before we log off. So working from top down, is there a difference between contributing 37.5 hours on a bank contract or 37.5 hours on a permanent substantive contract in your pension?
As far as I'm aware, no, but as long as you've got membership of the 2015 scheme, that should be exactly the same. But if there's any reason why you're not entitled to membership of that scheme, then it would be different.
I've worked in the NHS since 1997, but only joined the pension scheme in 2001. I'm on the 1995 and the 2015 scheme. Can I make up 3 years that I missed somehow?
No, in a word. So unless there was some kind of error, or you weren't given the opportunity to join when you should have been, or something like that, then you wouldn't be able to go back and pay those 3 years that you were not in the scheme originally.
Hi, I've got a special class status from the 1995 scheme, so I can take my pension next year. Is there any benefit to leaving it in, or should I just take it?
So, as far as I'm aware, there's no late retirement factor applied to it, but I'm not 100% sure on that. That might be something to check with the scheme administrators, whether there is a late retirement factor applied if you defer leaving it until, say, 60. For people in the 1995 section who don't have special class status, then if they left it from, say, 60 to 65, they don't really get any benefit from doing that. The pension would have inflationary increases, but they're just missing out on pension effectively. And I'm not 100% sure whether that's the same for people with special class status taking it at 55. So that's something to check with the administrator. Sorry, I don't know that one.
Fine. So Wendy, sorry Wendy, I didn't spot it at the top. Her colleague has inquired about partial retirement on an offer as she is 60. She wanted to access 1995 pension only, but she has been told that she will also have to access the 2015 scheme and will have reductions made because of this.
So partial retirement. I didn't think they had to take the 2015 benefits. But I might be wrong on that. My understanding was you could take the 1995 benefits, but same take of all your pension benefits. So yeah, I'm not 100% sure. Sorry.
Yeah, it's fair. It sounds like it's worth a phone call though.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I've worked for another trust until we went over to Sirona during 2020. Can we transfer the money? It was not an NHS pension.
Again, it would come down to that 1 year rule, that if you've been in the NHS scheme or had eligibility for more than a year, you can't transfer in.
I've nominated my son for my pensions benefit. I hope to retire when I'm 55. Would he receive the same death NHS benefits after I've retired from the NHS?
The benefits will be calculated differently. So, I mean, one of the key changes there is at the moment, membership of the scheme gives you a death in service pension of 2 times your salary. So that would no longer apply. There would still be lump sum death benefits, but the calculation of that will change. So you would get a notification of that when you take your pension. And
Okay.
if you want to look up, how they work it out, the sort of member booklets for each scheme, so on, have all the details in there.
We've got, Kath, 4 questions left.
Okay.
So I'm going to
One a
leave.
minute.
It'll be a quick fire round. So if you have longer than a week gap between moving from one trust to another, does it affect your pension? Not taken as annual leave, just an unemployed gap?
No, it's a 5-year gap that would affect your automatic sort of transfer of pension from one to the other. So if that gap is less than 5 years and it's within England or within Scotland or within Northern Ireland, then it would get automatically joined together.
I have contributions in the 1995, 2008 and 2015 schemes. When I reach 60, can I take my lump sum under the 1995, finish work and only claim the 2008 and 2015 benefits when I reach the pension age in these schemes at 68?
So you can't take just the lump sum. If you take your 1995 benefits, you're taking a lump sum and you're taking pension. And so, again, with the new options, you can have the retire and return, where you can take your 1995 benefits and come back, or you can have the partial retirement. But there's never a situation where you can just take tax-free cash as a lump sum and leave the rest of the benefits.
I worked for a private company before moving to the NHS over 7 years ago. How would my pension be worked out?
It depends what type of scheme they had. So it could be a defined benefit scheme like the NHS, or it could be a defined contribution scheme. So key thing, like I said earlier, understanding, is it DB, is it DC, really, takes you down a route one way or other of how it's calculated, what your options are, and everything else. So it's understanding that scheme. Get a statement and give us a call.
Brilliant. So I'm 64. If I take a pension now, is it a benefit, or wait till another few years? Wait for another few years.
So assuming we're not talking about the 1995 section here. So 1995, as I said, it doesn't get increased past 60. So if you haven't taken that yet, that's certainly something to look into. For the other sections, if you take them later, you will get more per year. Whether that's of benefit to you or not depends upon your current situation and what your situation is going to be later on in life. So it might be that you have plenty of money now, if you're still earning and you're a taxpayer, maybe you're a 40% taxpayer. Well, if you're a 40% taxpayer and then you take pension income, you're going to be paying 40% tax on that. So worth thinking about all those things. Would you rather have more per year when you're older, or would you rather have more money now? And that might depend on whether you're still paying a mortgage and want to get that paid off, and all those sorts of things. So there isn't a right answer that's the same for everybody, I'm afraid.
That's brilliant. And then the last question is a good one. It's easy. So the NHS Pensions telephone number, is that in your slides, Kath, I assume?
Yes, yeah, it was.
There we are. And that's it. And I'm so sorry, Chris, there wasn't an awful lot coming your way, but I hope you enjoyed the piece.
That's fine. I found that very informative. Anyway, thank you.
And actually, it's worth giving a shout out to the gender work that's been going on. There's a really interesting document. Chris, could you tell me the name of it again, that you've just released, that talks about the difference of gender pay? You did a big profile on it.
So it was the financial well-being and gender report. So I can drop it. There's a link in the slides, but I can drop it.
I was going to say, was that the one in the slides?
Yep.
It's a really, really interesting read to the participants that are still online. I would highly recommend you going and checking that out.